How's it going, guys? Welcome to Blocked Content, and today we're talking a little bit about Pokémon GO. So Pokémon GO has been released for a while now, and actually the whole world has been playing it. I've been playing it a little bit, it doesn't really run on my phone, but I've been playing it with some friends, and it's actually quite the opposite of what I expected it to be. So I thought, in all honesty, I thought this game would be a big flop. I thought there was no way they could live up to the hype of the first teaser trailer that was released with all the very cool footage of Pokemon in the real world, and I thought there's no way that it's going to be that big of a cultural impact. I was completely wrong. When Pokemon GO came out, it only took a few hours and everyone was downloading it, everyone was playing it, and everyone was finding new ways to, meet new people, meet new Pokemon, find new tactics. And the game is a lot deeper than I thought also. There's a lot more to do than you'd initially think with, it's just, it's a Pokemon game in real life, so you just catch Pokemon, right? So what you don't do in the game is you don't, go into tall grass and you fight a Pokemon and then you catch it. You can actually catch it straight away, which is a little bit weird for people who've played Pokemon before. Traditionally, you, of course, have your own Pokemon and you fight the other Pokemon. You weaken it so you can catch it and then it's yours. That's how it works. In this game, you simply slide the Pokeball. I think that's a little weird, but I got used to it pretty quickly, and I actually got a very cool rhythm in throwing the Pokeball too. You kind of get a feel for it later. Now, the reason that Nintendo made it this way is, of course, because a lot of new gamers are going to be playing Pokemon from now on. With Pokemon GO, there's this whole audience that has never played a Pokemon game before. They're kind of going to be forced to play this. Even at the office, I was talking to some people that had never even, played any Nintendo game before, and they had downloaded Pokemon GO because everyone was playing it, and everyone was kind of figuring out how does this work. But, having just a Pokeball to catch a Pokemon without, the whole battle system and everything latched onto it makes it a lot easier. So I get the decision, and it works really well. It's kind of hard also to catch some more specific Pokemon, not your standard Pidgeys or Rattatas. And that's one of the things that I really love is that, Pokemon can be found in places that you'd really expect them. There's even this little bridge very close to my house, and there are always, crabs kind of walking around there, and it's actually pretty scary if you don't like those creatures. And there are actually Krabby, nearby that place, which I thought was really cool. How do they do that? Niantic, please teach me your ways. But there are really cool ways to obtain new Pokemon. There's all sorts of tactics you can do to follow the steps and find pretty cool new creatures nearby. But it's when you get to a new area that you really feel what Pokemon GO can do, because it actually says, hey, you know what? You can kind of work out today. You get to walk this many miles, and that will hatch your egg, or that will, make you find more Pokemon, different types. So this game has kind of been this really cool cultural impact where people are actually going outside to play a video game. And I can't think of any other game that has done that, Nintendo is always at the forefront of, making gaming for everyone, and I love that because gaming should be for everyone. It should be like movies, and, everyone should be able to enjoy a video game because I think it's a medium that can still, grow a lot more and mean a lot more to a lot more people. And Nintendo is doing it right. With the Wii, they introduced motion gaming, and it got people out of their seats and doing very cool stuff with the Wii remote, but it also introduced gaming to a new audience, even younger kids, but also, adults and elderly also. And Pokemon GO is kind of doing the same thing now, and the one big change that it only had to do was just be on a smartphone, right? Because that's the only big change. They could have made Pokemon GO for the Nintendo 3DS, and we could have, thrown Pokeballs with the stylus and walk around, because that could have, the same kind of idea. But having it on a smartphone, everyone has a smartphone, and everyone would download Pokemon if it were free. And that's the really smart part, because it's free, but it's also kind of totally not free. And this is what I love about Pokemon GO. The lures you can buy, they kind of empower other players to also spend a little bit of money on Pokemon GO. And so actually Nintendo has made quite a lot of money on Pokemon Go already, even though it's a free game. It's a very smart tactic. And with these lures, you can, lure Pokemon to you, and other people will see that as well. So you're kind of doing everyone in the area a kindness, and this kindness is where the power of Pokemon Go shines, because everyone will do it for each other, and it kind of makes the whole world glow a little bit more. Nintendo, I would imagine, has the power to make certain Pokemon, jump up in certain times. So maybe we can even see some very specific events. Maybe we'll be able to finally catch the legendary birds Moltres, Zapdos, and Articuno. It might be possible down the line that Nintendo will just do events. Maybe they will pop up in a specific area in your country. That might also be possible, and that would, make people travel there. I've been thinking about the first trailer that they released for Pokemon Go, where it was just Mewtwo, in Times Square, and it was floating above, and, everyone was there with their smartphone trying to battle Mewtwo and trying to catch it. And I was very curious that, when New Year's comes up, very, very soon, at the end of this year, will they actually do the Mewtwo challenge? Will they actually have Mewtwo in the capital of your country? And will you need to travel there to fight Mewtwo along with all these people that play Pokemon Go? Because it would change the world, simply because, Nintendo has the power to, attract so many people to a certain location. That can also be, kind of dangerous. But I think it's such a cool little detail that you can have a game that, puts people on an actual journey, and it makes them feel like Pokemon trainers. And having Mewtwo on New Year's Eve doing something big like that, it would make every headline and everyone would want to catch Mewtwo. But how would it work? Would one person be able to catch Mewtwo? Would there just be one Mewtwo? Or would everyone be able to catch it if they're good enough? There are a lot of things that can still happen in Pokemon Go that isn't in the game right now. They're talking about trading. Actually trading Pokemon would be something that was really cool. Everyone, has a different experience playing the game. Everyone lives in a different place. And so there's a lot of different things happening, and you can even help other players to, kind of get started if you have a really cool, powerful Pokemon that you don't really need. So I think there's still, room for this game to evolve. But one of the major complaints that I have about this game, from a gaming perspective, is that I think the kind of the virtual reality, augmented reality stuff, it doesn't really work that well. And of course, this is one of the hardest tech to get, right. But I would love for, Pokemon to know where they are. So you can't just, turn the camera and they'd be on your wall or something and it just looks weird. I really hope there's a way to kind of fix those kinds of problems. And I even thought of what if they could kind of change the colors of the Pokemon, like the lighting for different situations. When you're at night, the Pokemon need to be a little darker. When you're in a forest and there's lighting coming from different places, maybe they can work with that. I'd love to see some, changes in the way that these augmented realities come to life on our screens, because, the thing that people share the most, which kind of made me think of Pokemon Snap, is the pictures of people playing Pokemon Go on the street and, walking their dog and then seeing Growlithe, the dog Pokemon, and just, doing all sorts of fun things, having Magikarp in the fishbowl and stuff like that. And I mentioned Pokemon Snap, because that was a game for the Nintendo 64 where you could take pictures of Pokemon, and that was what that game was all about. This really feels like a continuation of that, and fixing that whole augmented reality, or making it, every step of the way, making it a little better and making it work a little better, and maybe at some point the Pokemon even know where they are, what kind of environment, so they could jump out of grass or out of bushes and stuff like that. So I don't know how hard it would be to make stuff like that. I'd imagine it'd be pretty hard, because it's actually quite a cool achievement that they have this going right now. But simple things like the lighting, simple things like Pokemon being absolutely stationary to where you are at that moment, they could fix those kind of things, and I'd love to see that in future updates. And the one thing that I'd love to see, we have 150 Pokemon in the first generation, 151 if you count Mew. I don't know if they do. But of course, there are over 700 Pokemon at this moment, with Pokemon Sun and Moon coming out and expanding that roster exponentially. But yeah, in Pokemon Go, there are just 150, not even at this point. And I would love for every year that follows for Nintendo to add a new generation. Personally, Generation 2 is my favorite generation. I have a lot of love for the first generation, and I grew up with that. But the second generation has sort of this, oh wow, there's more, that kind of feeling. I've spent so much time with all these Pokemon, and I know every single one of them, and I know their traits, and I know how they work in the games. I know what episodes they were in the show, and then there were suddenly more Pokemon, a lot more, and evolutions and stuff like that. And they could do that same trick again for the new audience that just does not know this. And that would be really cool to see, these new Pokemon sprouting from nowhere, and people would, be baffled, wait, there's a lot more Pokemon in the world, and, the life of Pokemon Go can, just go on forever if they keep, putting new waves of Pokemon in every year. So I'd love to have my Cyndaquil starter, that I love. And maybe down the line, we even have Pokemon centers in the Pokemon Go games. We even have, gyms be more fleshed out, and you actually be a gym leader. There's a lot more that Nintendo can do with Pokemon Go to make it feel, even bigger. Because if I were to review it and rate it right now, the score probably wouldn't come up that good. I think it would be about a 6. It did change the world, I do think so. It changed the way people see games, and more importantly, I think it changed how people see gamers. Because now, it's very positive. A lot of people are going outside, going on these adventures, and it's a game that does that. So that's a very positive point. I'm very excited to see where Pokemon Go goes from here. But yeah, more than anything, I'd love to hear your Pokemon Go stories. What does your roster look like? Are there very cool Pokemon in your area? Tell me about, your Pokemon Go experience. I'd love to hear it. Subscribe to Block Content for a lot more on Pokemon Go, because we're actually going to spend a lot of time with this game from now on, because everyone is playing it, and we love Pokemon Go.